Hi there, my name is Neil Osborne. I am the chief writer and lead singer of the rock band 5440 from the West Coast of Canada, and you're listening to Talking Blues.
Let me begin by asking you how music came into your life.
Fairly early, I would guess. So I'm the youngest of four siblings. I have a brother that's 7 years older than me. So he would bring home records when I was, 6, 7, 8. In fact, he had a little band called the Junior Beatles, and they put on the single, and they would play cardboard cutout guitars, and he would get all my friends to pay 5 cents, and my mom would make popcorn, and we'd pretend to be the fans of the band. And so that was my first introduction of you know people who were musicians were heroes because my older brother was a hero to me, and yeah, from then he would bring home records and say, "Listen to this." I remember when he brought home the first Led Zeppelin record and Neil Young's After the Gold Rush, and many records that I would just listen to over and over and over, and became very obsessed with the whole thing.
So you took your brother's cardboard guitar.
Then he started a real band, and then I really got into watching them play and hanging out. So yeah.
Is it because of his band that you started playing the guitar?
Yeah, so he, as time went on, I guess fast forward to really later for me, later start. I guess I was about 12 or 13, maybe 14, where he was in one of the things he did was a duo at a lounge, like the Holiday Inn Lounge. And they had to learn Lion Eyes, by the Eagles. You can't hide your lion eyes. So he said if I transcribed the words, because in those days there's no internet, there's no,
Right.
you can't you have to listen to the record to know the lyrics and figure it out.
Pick up the needle, move it back and forth.
Exactly. So he said, if you transcribe the words, I'll show you a D chord. And I was like, wow, what? And I'll loan you my other guitar, that you can practice your D chord. So I faithfully transcribed Lion Eyes, and he taught me a D chord, and I sang every song I ever knew just playing a D chord. You know what I mean? Just like one chord, singing every Beatles song, every song I could think of over that D chord. It was awesome. Still one of my favorite moments.
Then did you learn other chords? Is that pretty well the way you've been going? No, I'm just kidding.
I probably transcribed a dozen songs, got a dozen chords, and he's like, "You only need three." So
And the D chord's
yeah,
used a lot too.
D chord's a good one. G's probably a little more prominent in our work, but yeah.
When did songwriting come into your life?
So that's not too far from there, to be quite honest. Um, that is how I sort of stumbled on something, would be original in the sense that I would um, try to write a song or try to figure out a song just from a few chords and a few notes. Like, oh, this could be this song, I think. And then I'd start to play and it would go to a different chord and I'd sing along. And I go, well, that's not that song. That's not Neil Young's Tell Me Why, but it could be something else altogether, which is kind of cool in its own way. So that's kind of how I discovered how to create, just kind of stumbling into it. Didn't actually write songs to perform until much later. I went to Berklee College of Music for a semester in 1979, 78. I can't remember now. And just as the new wave punk scene was breaking out, and my buddy from high school said, "Don't do that jazz stuff. Come back home, and we can start playing right now." I said,
Well, I'm
okay.
curious when you decided to go, what was the goal of attending Berkeley?
Well, I had a pretty good guitar teacher, and I kind of lost interest at that point in time. Later in high school, the whole fusion thing was happening. With Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock, and those are my heroes then. John McLaughlin on guitar. So I thought that I wanted to be a jazz guitar player, or fusion at the very least. And so I memorized, took me hours, like how to play Joe Pass or Herb Ellis style, and got all the books. And I had a pretty good teacher, a guy named Oliver Gannon, who gave me a referral letter. And then I got to Boston. And I was 18, and probably the youngest person there. And there's like 500 guitar players. It was like, what am I doing here? So I gave it my all, but I could tell pretty quickly my heart wasn't in it. I remember when I had my personal guitar teacher. You take various courses, right? Arranging, listening analysis, ear training, private lesson, and ensemble work. And my private lesson teacher was very good. He was a good friend of my teacher from Vancouver. And as I was going into my class, he introduced me to the student before, and he said that was his best student, and he was graduating four-year degree. And so that's great. He was a super nice guy. I met him, sat down, and something came to me for some reason. I said, "So that guy that I just met, who's going to graduate this year, like, so what's he gonna do? Like, what's gonna happen to him?" He goes, "Oh well, he's one of the best. If he's really lucky, he might get in on a cruise ship or an orchestra pit. If he's really lucky, like in a Broadway show, but he'll probably be a teacher at a high school." And I just went, no, I'm not going 4 years to not be the best and to like hope for being a teacher. I just went, I can't do that. So as soon as I got the letter, it was a letter from my buddy Brad in high school. Come back. I just went. My parents weren't happy, to tell you the truth, but dropped out and came back, and we started a band. And my gosh, we were playing within 3 months. So
Wow. But I wonder, so were you playing in a band before you went to Berkeley?
no, just jamming around with a couple of friends.
But that's it, like
Nothing.
no formal bands, no real musical.
No, I never really performed, to tell you the
Wow.
truth. A little bit in like theater in high school. It's like as my theater project, I put a little band together or something like that. But
So had you not asked that teacher what happens to this guy when he graduates,
yeah,
what did you envision would have happened when you graduated?
well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you always, when you're a kid, growing up and evolving, as an 18-year-old into so many changes that happen between, say, 18 and even 28. I kind of figured something would have emerged. I would have ended up somewhere doing something, possibly a teacher, I guess. It just depends. But I did get to see John McLaughlin play there twice, which is very inspiring. So that was tempting to stay and put in the work, but
So
I
you
didn't.
must have been half decent to want to pursue that type of music and also to be accepted into Berkeley.
Yeah, yeah. I think looking back, I wasn't as good as I thought I was. I just memorized stuff like crazy. And I did get fairly good marks for two things. One was arranging, which I could do some good arrangements of jazz standards, different. Just like, oh, let's put a pedal through this whole song and see how that goes. And got pretty good marks in my first semester that way, and also improvisation. So I had a natural kind of knack for just rhythmically mostly. You know, Guitar playing is really string drumming. So
What did you learn about yourself as a musician from that experience at Berkeley?
I think I learned primarily that I would want to get more involved in creating and performing, you know, rather than being part of another group or being part of something, contributing in that way. I was a little more egotistical, I guess, and that I wanted to create my own stuff and realize my own visions musically and perform it as well, rather than maybe just be an arranger or maybe just read sheet music in an orchestra pit if I was even that lucky or good. So none of that really appealed to me.
Were you good at reading?
Was okay, to be quite honest. Once again, if I had the chart for a while, give me an hour and then I could sit down and pretend I'm reading it and I kind of knew it.
So, so you get this letter and you think, okay, I'm going to go home. Do
Mhm.
you know musically what you want to do?
No, well, it was sort of that scene that was coming alive. I was in Boston, so the band The Cars, I think, was pretty big. Elvis Costello, and then the British bands, The Clash, and that it seemed more important. It was like culturally changing. It was like that was, I think, when still rock music, represented cultural shift. You could look to it as to see where the pulse of society, especially in the West, was going. And you felt like you were part of something. Whereas jazz, fusion kind of broke the envelope a little bit, but mostly you're just, walking on familiar roads. And it's hard to be good doing that because there's so many before you that was so great. So,
But you go back and now you have to figure out the live scene and the band scene and performing.
yeah.
So this is all
Yeah.
new to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty electric, and literally and physically and metaphorically, and you know, just being so scared on stage, and the thrill. It was pretty amazing. So that's pretty addictive. You don't even know what happened, and you got off somehow. And it's like the story of golfers, right? It's like they have the shittiest game ever, and then they when's the next one?
When you say scary, like how scary was that?
Initially, for the first few years, it was pretty scary, like walking into an unknown, ocean of whatever is going to happen and somehow getting through it. But it was also, like I say, very thrilling. So scary in the sense of just, all eyes are on you all of a sudden. It's not something that I was used to, and you realize that you can't just hide. You can't hide in the corner with your music stand or whatever. You have to perform and interpret what you're performing. Right?
Are you singing by this point?
Yeah. No, initially we were going to find a singer, but we couldn't find anybody that. We had one guy that he didn't want to do it. We thought he was good, but he went to university, and then Brad and I divided the singing, and then he decided that I was a little better, and then so then I did it all. We were a three piece initially, and you got to remember in that scene in Vancouver, the underground music scene, it was quite a wide spectrum. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I would even call atonal. Like there were some art students that just went out there, and went as extremely out there as they could. And then there was just the hardcore, straight thrashy punk stuff and any arty stuff in between. It was actually quite amazing how it all got along, all those different styles at the time.
How did you envision what you were doing? Like what was is it was it 5440 by this time or not yet?
Oh yeah, it was always 5440. Yeah.
How did you see the band at that point?
Hmm. Um, well, we modeled ourselves after sort of the post-punk, dark British scene, but we also threw in a little, I don't know what you'd say, Americana in there. So, we just jammed a lot, and whatever kind of took us into a state of getting lost in it, we would try to hang on to and keep, and we'd make these bizarro arrangements initially, that were sometimes three, four songs in one. It seemed like, yeah, and I think a lot of bands go through that. They're trying to figure out their style and learn how to write a song. I mean, we thought they were killer pop songs, but if you listen to them now, you're like, no, that's pretty weird and out there, but good in itself.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know if we had a vision so much as just enjoyed creating and then playing it, and it seemed to draw enough of an audience that at least other musicians at the time liked us enough to ask us to play with them. So that's how we sort of grew. Is a lot of bands wanted us to play with them, and then we got, I guess, after a couple of years, big enough where we could play our own show and ask bands to play with us. And that's sort of how it grew.
Did you think at that point you were a stronger live performer or stronger songwriter?
Um, Probably. Well, it was both. We enjoyed the songwriting more. In those days, we didn't, initially, although we did fairly quickly actually, release stuff. So you would play stuff that you wrote. Nobody had any other chance to hear it other than if they came to see you play it. But that was a whole experience. You performing it, on stage, and you being really passionate about it, and that translates. Seemed to have translated. Um, but the writing was always so fun and special because you're creating something out of nothing. It's amazing how that happens. It's like you're inventing new language on the spot. It's like wow. It's so. I remember just being so thrilled that we were doing this, like just, and then as a group, putting it together, three or four musicians delivering that. It's nothing to be taken for granted. I don't think. Because nowadays people make records on laptops, which is fine, but there's something about getting three or four musicians together and getting a groove or getting a style and sort of seeing where it follows. You need a good drummer that can kind of keep you going, but there's a special quality of that experience.
I don't know if you would see it this way because you were living through this, but things happened pretty quickly for you guys, right? Like you had an EP out relatively soon after getting together. You signed with a major label not too long after, and you had hit
Yeah.
records.
Well, it's yeah, putting it like that is kind of true. But there's a lot of steps and a lot of stuff in between that happens. Yeah, I mean, I think because we were always motivated and ambitious to keep creating and growing musically, that things sort of fell into place. I remember an older artist, musician friend of mine, what was his name? Colin, somebody. He talked about art because he's mostly an artist, and he says you can try to make something that is popular and people will be attracted to, or you can try to nurture your own sort of, I don't know, numinous or centrifugal force, and then people will be attracted to that, and it can grow that way. And initially, I think that's what we were focused on, and things started to just grow without us really noticing, and then all of a sudden, you know, then you notice like the major label deal was kind of trippy and overwhelming at the same time. Oh, we
This
got,
is why was this not something you sought after?
no, although it became, I remember quite clearly, I think it was 19, would have been 1986, 5. Um, we put out our own EP. We were part of another EP. We put out our own album, all from working in family businesses and, part-time jobs, enough money to get some after midnight time in a studio and, pay for the pressings and all these sort of things. And, we had more songs we wanted to do and no money, no way to make it happen. And it was kind of a crux. They're like, well, what's going to happen? Can't sort of get to the next record out. That's all we really wanted. I don't know. About a week later, we got a phone call from our manager that Warner Brothers wanted to sign us, and I was like, whoa, what? So why?
Well, was that because the band was creating a buzz? Was it because they heard the your
Yeah, a bunch of
EP?
people from yeah. So I think it was what's his name, Macklem, Steve Macklem, who was Katie Lang's manager, and Katie Lang got signed down there, and they asked him, well, what else is going on up in Canada? And they go, oh, just got to see this band, 5440. So they sent a couple people up and liked what they saw, and they brought us down, and we did this showcase for all the labels, and it was just so, you know, it, believe it or not, that's not what we intended when we started the band. It wasn't about a record label. It was just about, we didn't even really know. We were so naive. We just wanted to keep making music and going on the road and, our manifesto was to survive to the next gig, survive to the next record. That's all. That was it.
Can you
And of
give us
course,
an idea of like the 4 song EP? What kind of cost would that have been at that time for you to have to save up?
yeah, probably about $1,000, maybe not even that much. This is done in a 16-track 2-inch tape. Once again, this is you couldn't record at home like people do now.
Right.
I mean, I have a pretty decent studio, just over there on the other wing of the house here. And you couldn't do that then. You had to have a big 2-inch machine. When we did the Set the Fire record, which was the album, we went in after midnight. It was $25 an hour. We went in with Dave Ogilvy, who was a good friend of ours, and the board had to be zeroed and cleaned and everything by 6 a.m. because they would come in with like sometimes an orchestra to do jingles and all kinds of stuff. Like
The moneymaker.
even yeah, even music, all music that was on the radio or even for ads had to be recorded
Right.
by musicians back in those days, not like a laptop program and these days. So we had to be out of there, but we got it for $25 an hour. So 6 hours, midnight to six. Uh, they were tough days, I'll tell you. Going to Denny's at 6:30 in the morning for your breakfast, and then going to sleep.
And you
Yeah.
were working full time?
No, we were working part time. So my family had a print shop, printing business cards and letterheads and that kind of thing. And Brad, the bass player who I started with, his family ran an aluminum recycling plant. So he was living there in the sort of security man's house and working when he could. And then I worked when I could for the family. And then the other members of the band, as they came, we'd give them jobs too. So we'd sort of make enough money that we could go on the road.
And what did going
So
on the road mean back then? Where did you go?
we would go. So initially, like I said earlier, we started to do some of our own shows, and then we brought a band called what were they called? I can't remember. There's a band called B Team from San Francisco. There's a couple Seattle bands that heard about us and asked us to go play with them in Seattle, and then we would ask them to come play with us, and then when we were in Seattle, they do these things where it would be a Vancouver band and then a Portland band and a Seattle band, and so we met the Portland band and then did that same thing and then to San Francisco and down to LA. So we didn't even hit Alberta till well after we'd been to California a number of times. We never hit Toronto until we were signed to Warner Brothers. It's just too far.
And did you have goals
Well,
other than
no.
make it to the next gig?
Yeah, pretty much. I think about it. We were just, I mean, Brad, one of his, like I said, survival and make our next record. But the other thing was, make sure we can tell the folks when we're on stage where our next show is. So we always want to make sure we had another gig that we could say. And the other thing that we said was, you're only as good as the gig that you're playing. You already earned the gig. So the gig you're playing now, you're earning the next gig. In other words, you're creating fans. You're creating a buzz that you'll get to play somewhere else. Hopefully, a better, bigger, or newer place. And that's still the philosophy that we have. We try to do our best foot forward all the time because they lead to things, great experiences, great shows, great times. That's not changed at all.
How much did the world change once you got signed to the major label, Warner Reprise label?
It was kind of weird and overwhelming because everything was DIY up until that point. And then we had young guys as our managers. They were kind of our age and from other bands, and their bands kind of petered out, and they took on managing us, and we were all very naive dealing with the executive situation down there. And when we wanted to do something, we would just do it, whether it was mail a record somewhere or go phone call somewhere or knock on a door. And all of a sudden there was this language and this process of how things were done that was very confusing and intimidating, and at the same time thrilling. And I don't think we really grasped it as well as we could have or perhaps should have. And then, of course, we got dropped after three records with Warner Brothers because they didn't really take down in the States. And that's a weird feeling because up till then, everything we did was we did it on our own and we were happy with it and did it the best we could. And then we move on to the next one. There's never, you don't drop yourself. You know what I
Right.
mean? You're not, it was weird. We didn't comprehend that we were actually in partnership or under contract to that sort of thing until we were dropped that we sort of figured, what just happened? But fortunately, Columbia picked us up out of Canada right after that. So.
But when you got dropped, you were making pretty decent headway in Canada.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So it was more the fact that things were not happening in the States. Is that correct?
yeah,
But you were
yeah,
touring the States too.
yeah. We toured the states right through. I guess till well, we even toured in the '90s a fair bit, but promoting the Warner's records, yeah,
Can
those
you
were tough times.
can you explain that? Like I always wonder why a band could be as successful as you are in Canada and maybe not make an impact in a different country. Does that does it make sense to you, or does it like is it a matter of how much you expose yourself down there and how much time you put into it, and it's simply just you gotta work it as much as you can, or is it more to it than that?
I think that's a lot of it. I've heard lots of stories of, you know, what could have happened and what might have happened and all that sort of stuff. I mean, one of the things that happened, well, when we signed to Warner Brothers, they were easily the biggest label in the world, and we were the smallest band that they'd ever signed. And they had, Dolly Parton, they had Madonna, they had Prince, they had Miles Davis. I mean, they were all in the hallways, and you're looking like, Jesus Christ, that's Miles Davis. Um, and of course, people are looking at you like, can you make a photocopy of this for us, please? And we didn't know what we were doing there. Uh, and then the payola scandal happened right when our record came out. So that might have been, and people have told me that's, we were a victim of that to some degree. Hard to say. Where, I don't know if you're familiar with what that was at the time. Basically, record companies were taking DJs out for expensive dinners and holidays and other, essentially bribes to play artists. So whether that would have happened with us anyway is hard to say. There's a lot of bands that emerge that don't take on a national level, especially in the States, and are quite popular regionally.
Hmm.
Like there's the Angora Ballroom circuit. There's some great bands even now that tour that. Nobody knows who they are out west. Some great West Coast bands. Nobody knows who they are anywhere else. Canada, we were lucky in the sense that Much Music really took to us at the time, and they were kind of the leading edge of breaking music more than any radio station was. In fact, when we released our first Warner record and we had a song called Baby Ran, rock radio really didn't touch it until Much Music was all over it, and then kids started to phone in to the radio stations and they wanted to hear it, and you know,
And that did well in college radio stations in the States as well, did it not?
yeah, college was good in the States with us, but in those days, college was still pretty college. It wasn't until a little after that that it became an industry, and by then we were dropped and didn't have the pull to the colleges. But colleges in Canada, universities, Frost Week was a big week. Frost Week was a way to break bands too. I mean, not only our band, but the Hip and Pursuit of Happiness, and tons of bands would cut their teeth playing Frost Weeks, and then gain legions of fans from the universities, right? Um, and those people stuck with you even now. We still get people that first saw us when they were at their first university. So that's kind of cool.
That is cool. I mean, it's neat to see have that kind of a relationship because oftentimes when the music that people grow up with is the music that stays with them the rest of their lives.
Yeah, well, I think both of us can be included in that. So yeah, it's formative.
And were you able to enjoy the success in Canada even though you were getting pressure from the US or for the US labels?
Um, I probably went through a phase where I was too obsessed with why we weren't more successful. I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. Remember somebody gave me some advice, which I learned to take later, which is try to enjoy this while you can. And it wasn't until maybe third record in with Sony that I was, what, I'm just gonna just enjoy this, all parts of it, career, whatever happens, happens. Now, by that time, we had an established career enough that we could make a living and not worry too much. But I probably took things too seriously, things that I just had no control over either. You know, I just stuck more to keeping the music, which I did, writing, performing, and letting everything else just fall where it falls. That's fine.
I often wonder when you get involved with a major label, there's a lot of money that goes into making that product visible, and a lot of
Mm.
money that's coming out of your bank account or your future earnings. Was that, and obviously being new to the music industry in that type of environment, was that, did that affect your band a lot?
In what sense?
In the sense that by the time you come out of that contract, um, you might have not made as much money as you hoped because of the success that you had, because Warner's might have poured in a lot of money to promote you.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, those were obviously very, very different times than I think they are now. Although I don't really know. I think there's some record companies that do invest a lot, but they want more for it. You know, a record company in those days, it's a weird, it's a very, very bad loan, is what it is,
Yeah.
in the sense, they give you, let's just say, $100,000 to make a record. It was more than that, but let's just say it's $100,000, and then they're going to sell that record for $15. Out of that $15, they're going to give you 85 cents. Okay. Now, granted, they pay for the record, they press it, they put it in stores, they promote it, they may pay for a video, but then those expenses get added into that $100,000. So let's say now it's $250,000.
And you don't know that all this money is being used. I
No.
mean, that's like they kept taking it out of your future purse or whatever.
So it's $250,000, and they're selling it for, let's just say, I don't know, $20. What you make is 85 cents out of that $20. That 85 cents goes against the $250,000 that they've loaned you. So do you follow me here?
Yeah, yeah.
I remember when we were 3 or 4 records in, we did 5 or 6 with Sony, and the president, who was the second president that we were dealing with at the time, Rick Camilleri, he calls me into his office and goes, here's the books, and it's like, you guys aren't quite making us enough money, but we love you so much, we're going to stick with you, and you're going to make a couple more records with us. And I was like, wow. And then I go tell my manager, and he's just like, that's horseshit. It's like, basically, you hadn't recouped the money. They're still at that time selling CDs for $20 a pop, right? We're getting paid $1 a CD. Okay, so we're into them for 800,000 over 3 or 4 records, but they've made 3 or 4 million or 5 million on the sales. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
here? Like, so on the one set of books that we haven't recouped the 800 grand, where we're actually then getting the dollar a CD. So it's a funny game. But at the same time, you can when they drop you or you walk away from it and the contract expires, they you don't owe them the money. They can't come after you.
Right.
It's all strictly out of the sales of the music. So it's we were of the mindset that, hey, you wanna spend money on us? Go ahead.
Well, but
Really?
they got some return from you guys. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did essentially 9 records for major labels, so something must have gone right.
and so when you said, I got to learn how to enjoy this a little more, and then realize that, and you said that was around the third album. That's still
Mhm.
pretty early in your lifespan there to come to that realization and to actually start enjoying it. How did that
Hmm.
affect you when you decided to change your attitude that way?
I was. It was gradual. I gotta admit. I'd still get my knickers in a knot here and there, but very liberating. You know, just it really does come down to if you write a good song or you perform a good show, good things will happen. And that's about all you can control. You even can't control that. You just do the best you can. So yeah, it's just easier, just letting things be what they are and appreciating the subtleties. One thing, like we still play quite a lot, 30, 40, 50 shows a year, depending on circumstances. Um, and a lot of the times we play the same 10 or 12 hit songs that people want to hear, plus whatever we can try to inject into that set. But we really enjoy the subtleties of playing those same songs as a band. Like, oh, you're kind of leaning it, you're pushing it there. That's kind of cool. And this whole musician dynamic that happens. I wouldn't have thought about that 20 years ago at all. Just 30 years ago, all I wanted to do is get through it. Like
Well,
20 years ago, it's like, how successful are we? Now I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Look at how we're like going with this G that way, and da, 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 I'm just enjoying the making of the music while we're making it.
I mean, could you have imagined when you first started that you would be doing this at this point in your life?
No, not at all. No, and I get asked that in some fashion or other, like, what was your goals when we started out? And it really was just the next gig or trying to put out another record. It was never sort of this make a living. I remember it was about 1992, I guess, when we got a whack of dough from Sony, and it's like I guess we can call this a career now. Like,
Was there any time after that that you thought, well, I don't know if we can continue doing this? Did you ever? I know
no,
you guys took a hiatus for a little while, but was there ever a point where you thought, oh, I can't do the music thing anymore?
we never really took a hiatus.
Oh,
I
I
don't know
thought
where
you
you
did
got that.
around 2006, 2007.
No, no, we've always been open for business. I mean, there's been some lean times, that's for sure. But no, we've always been open and always made a record. I mean, there's been gaps.
Right.
That's it was a big gap in terms of creating. Just took longer than
Can I
we
ask
wanted
you
to.
about the lean times? What does that mean?
Um, well, the sense of it I get, and I'm inside the goldfish bowl. I can't really tell you what the goldfish bowl looks like so much as, but the sense of it I get, looking back, is that we weren't as popular, or there wasn't as much demand for the band, or we weren't on a pulse. And that's happened to us a couple of times where it feels like it's getting pretty thin out there. The gigs aren't coming as good, and they're not as high paid, and the offers aren't great. And then all of a sudden, it just changes. Boom! All of a sudden, we are the flavor of the month in a nostalgic way again. And we've
There's
been
no
riding.
rhyme or reason behind this. It just
Not that
happens.
I know. I mean, right now it's a battle of attrition, right? In the sense that some of the classic rock bands, are no longer. Either they're not with us on Earth anymore, or they just retired, um, or they've disbanded.
Right.
Right?
I mean, I think to me, the song is king. And when you
Mm.
have a hit song or hit songs like you have, obviously that creates nostalgia. And we're talking about people growing up with your music. Tell me about
Mm.
that relationship you have with the hits. Because the hits, I find like a fascinating concept. I don't know if every song that's a hit for you was something you thought this is going to be a hit. You might have written
Mm.
other songs that you like way more that mean a lot more to you that never became a hit. But when a song becomes a hit, how does that affect you and how does that change your perspective of that song?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's an ongoing analysis, really. Um, I had through the late '80s and the '90s, I kind of had a decent record of knowing which one was going to work. Say about 40 to 50% of the time, I go, "Oh, this one's gonna fly." And Dave says, "That's actually a really good record. Like if you could be an A&R guy and be that good, you'd be David Geffen or something." Um, there's been some where I thought, "Oh, for sure this one's gonna fly," and it doesn't. And you're like, that's weird." But you can always tell a song that has its own energy, and then it gets thrown out there. And we had some good support, certainly from record companies and whatnot. But it still has to hit. And it's funny. Like, what is a hit? What does that mean? And I'm sure there's definitions of why that word is used. But for me, it's something that you hear right away, and that happens to me sometimes. Even now, I hear a song and I go, "What's this?" It hits me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like I perk up and I want to know more. And then, so in our case, when it happens, there's while it's happening, there's a bit of a buzz. So we notice it from shows. Let's just say Ocean Pearl, or I Go Blind, whatever it would be. Sheila, whatever song. We notice that the crowd would really get animated when they heard it. Sometimes before it was even released.
Wow.
So then you knew you had something. Certainly, once it was on the radio, that's you could tell that's the one they want to hear. You can just feel the lift in the room. Now we're the stewards of these songs, right? We're like we keep the archives.
Yeah.
We deliver the song that 5440 in 1990 created, and we deliver it fairly well. We're probably the best at it, I hope. And people, like you say, relive that experience. So it's a nice thing to have that, right? It's a known trip that people can go on and feel satisfied, right? Like if you could spend $300 and go see a hockey game, which I've done, and they lose. It's not a fun time. It sucks. But if you spend, a little bit of money and go see one of your favorite bands like Neil Young or something, even then, it took me 3 times seeing Neil Young to hear Cinnamon Girl. I finally heard it, and I cried. So, but yeah, you're rewarded that way. So it's having songs that are hits to the audience. Uh, Once again, the subtlety of it, and then you incorporate the energy of the room and the people that are with you when you play it. For any band or artist to say they're bored of it, they don't want to play it because it's that's all people want to hear. They're missing something. They're missing that experience. It's so unique each and every time. Um, yeah, sure, I know you know what to do, but it's a new experience.
And I presume you never hear it the way we hear it, right? Like, yeah, I mean, I hear Baby Ran and it takes me to a different place in my life. There's a memory attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Your memory could be in the studio or it could be dealing with a record company. But I presume that shifts, that different memories are created with your songs.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can think about those things. That song is, yeah, certainly when we play every show, pretty much. I think I can remember studio. I can remember a lot of things about it, but when I'm playing it, I'm just enjoying into the moment of it and going on the crest of the wave, and the swirl, and those things are really where it's at, playing it anyway.
So did I hear you correctly that you did say you cried when you finally heard Cinnamon Girl?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
So I saw Neil Young, I guess about it was the third or fourth time. I've seen him 4 times. I think it was no, yeah, it was the third time out of four. The fourth time was just an acoustic show, which was really brilliant too. Um, and the first time I saw him, he was just doing the hits, but he didn't play that one, and I still enjoyed it.
Right.
And he did a great version of "Day in the Life" by the Beatles as the encore, which I thought was killer.
Wow.
The second time I saw him was I don't know how familiar you are with Neil Young, but he did this Greendale thing. where, where he had the play on stage, like all his people that from his ranch or whatever, and they
Yeah.
were actors. Yeah. And there was a book, and a friend of mine got me a signed copy, and I met Elliot Roberts, his manager there. Didn't meet him, but it was great. And but he he was great. He had a music stand, and he was singing the words to this play, and it was Crazy Horse was the band, and he had a fan to keep him cool, but the fan blew off all the words, and he had to have stop the whole show, which was fantastic. And he goes, "I promise I'll do a double encore with all the hits. If I just can start again." And the crowd stood up and cheered, and I did too. But he didn't play Cinnamon Girl there. It wasn't until he was at Rogers Center, where the Canucks play, and I got some great seats. And I don't know, third or fourth song in, there it was, and I just, you know, oh, yeah, I don't know, for that song, just I wanted to hear it, and I did. So,
Wow.
and like you say, like for fans, right? Like I remember sitting in my parents. They had the old cabinet stereo, right?
Yeah.
Sears wooden cabinet stereo where you lifted and you played the record, and I put on, you know, Neil Young, and just get a pillow by one of the speakers and listen to the whole thing and just be there. It was just, I don't know, for some reason that song really connected with me. That was a hit to me. I don't know if it was a hit on the radio. Probably was, I
Yeah, I
guess.
think so. So when people come up to you and they're songs that obviously you wrote that means that much to them in the same way that Cinnamon Girl meant to you, like when somebody says that to you, how does that make you feel?
Well, I respect. I was like exactly. That's kind of where I go. I respect that their feelings and their emotions. I also, know that they like the song, not the person, and that's a distinguish there. I'm not afraid, or I'm not. Uh, that's a clear line to me. Like I don't regret that I didn't meet Neil Young. I don't know if I think that might have burst my bubble, to be quite honest. Um, but because I just love what he created, I love the song. I don't love the man. I don't know the man.
Right.
So when people come up, and that happens quite a bit, I get a lot of people saying that song really did something to me. I mean, even other artists, you know, people telling me Ocean Pro was the first thing they learned on the guitar, or this record made them want to be a singer, and all that sort of stuff. That feels really good to hear, and I go back to what I heard, and so I respect that feeling, but I don't take credit for it. I don't feel like I'm some sort of god or anything like that. And it takes a lot for somebody to come up to me and say something like that. Not an easy thing to do,
Hmm.
but I appreciate that. But I also say, like, I'm the steward. I just look after it and deliver it. And
So if we
happy to
take
do.
that a step further, when somebody like Hootie and the Blowfish take your song and
Hmm.
make it a hit,
Hmm.
and it's something that you might have created in your basement and whatever, and all of a sudden it's on Friends TV show or soundtrack, and
Hmm.
what does that do to you?
A number of things. Where are you? What are you referring to?
Well, I mean, obviously it must be nice to know that something you created is appreciated by somebody else, another artist, enough that they
Yeah.
would cover it.
Yes. So
And
those
that must,
guys, yeah, they were. So we played States a fair bit in the '80s, and they were students at University of South Carolina, and they would come up to Washington D.C. We played the 930 Club quite a bit, and they came to all our shows, and they played every REM song and every 5440 song that they knew. That was their frat band, and they became Hootie and the Blowfish. So they were big fans of the first two records on Warner's, and then never heard from them again until I heard that you know, there was this band we were playing actually in Cincinnati, and my management office called and said, "There's this band, and they're pretty big, and that the B side of one of their songs is 'I Go Blind.'" I went, "What?" Took a while to put it together. It's frustrating for me because I distinctly I remember this. And this is a bit of sour grapes, but here you go. When were in Los Angeles playing the final record for Lenny Waronker, who was the president of Warner Brothers, and our guy, played him "I Go Blind," and it's just like sounds so good, and he's nodding away, and but the executives determined that a song called "I Want to Know," which is a good song, should be the single, and then, and I always thought they missed the boat on "I Go Blind," and even "I Go Blind" wasn't really released in Canada until Warner Canada released it due to demand by the fans. Never got released in the States. And it felt kind of, I was a little vindicated 10 years later when Hootie made it a hit. And it was the top three played on AC radio. We got an award for it in 1996. So
Wow.
that felt good. But at the same time, it kind of felt like, Jesus, you had one. You had one, you bastards at Warner Brothers in 1986. You just didn't know it.
I want to talk to you about A Family Curse, which I think is a fantastic name for a project.
There you go. There's a blues band right there.
There you go. Yes. So, what's it like working with your daughter? Is it when you work with your daughter? Does it become a musician to musician relationship, or does it change the relationship that you have, the father and daughter relationship?
Well, it's kind of both. She's definitely, picked it up very well, and it's innate in her. We speak very common language, you know, uh, but it's natural. In other words, I have two kids. The oldest, we get along really well and also speak a very good language. It's different. With Candle and I, it's musically, we kind of go to the same places very quickly, always have. So we did this thing kind of through COVID where it's like, I got these ideas kicking around. I don't know what to do with them. You want to sing on them? And she went, sure, I'll give it a shot. And I was like, that's kind of cool. And so I just, and I was learning how to play some slide guitar, like, not good enough, really. Thinking it's not good enough for 5440, but hey, maybe Cat can do some of it. It's like, hey, that's cool. So, it happened very organically and spontaneously, and bada bing, bada boom, there we were, and it's like, well, we got ourselves a little band here, so made a family curse.
And not just the little side project where you just record something and have her sing on it, but you're creating a different persona and
Yeah,
videos, like many videos.
yeah. So that was the COVID times. First thing I did was order a green screen on Amazon, and she got stuck. She was living in Montreal, but she got stuck during COVID and decided to stay with us. So it's like, okay, well, let's do some stuff. Um, yeah, it's quite a lot of fun. She decided to distinguish, her own career, which is really strong, and her own music, by becoming these personas. So we wanted to be sort of outlaw Texan, kind of bluesy,
Right.
snake and desert stuff, and she wanted to sort of like pursue that angle. And I was like, yeah, go for it. So we decided to, yeah, go for it.
And will you be doing more of this?
Well, we did a little tour last summer. I learned pretty quickly that unless you call 5440, if you're on the road, it costs money. So we put a little band together, and we were on the road for about 10 shows, and heck of a lot of fun, but barely broke even.
Okay, so the other thing that you did during COVID was work on this latest album for 5440.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
West Coast band. Is there a West Coast sound?
Um, I don't know what that is. Certainly, a song like Options could be that sort of groove, but I mean, it's us, so yes. You know,
True.
uh, you know, alluding back to sort of the attitude, of that scene when we grew up in it. Like people like Art Bergman and Subhumans and DOA, and they were the more the punky stuff. But even other artists, there's a general kind of attitude that I think and pointed sticks we've carried and still have. And I think it's innate. in everybody that's from that era, and it sticks with you. It's hard to put a finger on it. It's our own version of an attitude of irreverence and indifference, but caring quite a bit about what you do, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, it's an interesting album because it seems more like your earlier stuff to me,
No.
as compared to your last album, which I really liked, which
Hmm.
was a lot more sophisticated. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it just seemed like this one was more, and punk's not the right word for it, but there was a different kind of energy to it.
Yeah. It's rock and roll, really, in some ways. Um, yeah. Well, once again, we just go where the muse takes us. Seems like that record, the West Coast Band, is a lot of fun. Because they're all stories of the band, and it started with Zoom calls during COVID, where we were just, we had this Thursday 5 o'clock that Brad and Alan, our manager, decided to do, where we would everybody grabs a cocktail from their house and you know cheers, and then there's nothing to talk about because there's no gigs for 2 years,
Right.
right? There's nothing, but we just started telling stories and having a lot of laughs about the times we've had over the last 35, 40 years. So I had a bunch of stuff from Soundcheck and other ideas kicking around on my iPhone, and I went, we could just turn some of these things into songs. Like, what the heck? So we had a list of 25 little phrases that we stuck with, like every band has their own language. And I started taking some of those riffs and let's call this one Chicago. Let's call this West Coast Band. And it was the first record that we've done, where I didn't write a word down.
Really?
Yeah, I sang at Stream of Consciousness. So I basically, after a Zoom call, you get so inspired. I think the first song that I wrote was Table for One, which is about our drummer, Matt. And what is the riff? Dun, 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 or no. Anyway, I can't remember. But I had this riff, and it's like, oh. And it was the story. It's the story of why he's called Table for One, and it's in the song. Whatever. And I don't want to get into it too much, but ever since then, he's been called Table for One. And I put a quick arrangement, quick blues arrangement, like boom, it's done. And sang three versions of it, just telling the story as best as I could, quickly rhyming. And then I listened to each three passes, and oh, that's better than that one. And then there it was. It was done. Sent it to them. They all went, "This is amazing."
Wow.
That you're done. And we retracted, obviously, but I sent. So the way the record worked is I would stripe that, and then I sent it to Matt, and he has a little electronic drum kit at home, and he just put it to my iPhone demo, sent it back to me, and I sent it to Brad. He came up with a fill-in bass line, and then my brother on sax, and Dave on guitar, and then we basically had the song. And then we went and retracted when things loosened up a little bit after some of the COVID, and got in a studio and made it for real. It was just so alive,
Hmm.
you know, rather than sort of slaving over it. We just, let's just do it.
So I presume that in the early years you would have spent a lot of time in the studio trying to perfect things and making it as good as possible and spending a lot of studio money. This wasn't that. Um,
No.
why why do you continue to record? Like why with the business being what it is and things so different? What
Hmm.
motivates you to do what you do?
It's funny. It's a funny question because, you know, creativity is important to us. Like Brad says, if we didn't make records, we probably wouldn't be a band. Like my answer to what your question is also is it proves that we're doing it for the right reasons, because no one is asking for a new 5440 record. No one is paying us to make a 5440 record like they used to.
Right.
We do it because we're compelled to do it, because once again the muse is there, and we're choosing to go with it and listen to it, and it's fun. It's fun as heck. So that's why you go. as a band, we kind of had a record every 2 years for a while there, although that we had a few glitches in that concept. But where you have an experience in the world, and the world itself changes, and then you throw out what you've experienced and what you see and the vision that you have after those 2 years, and it's really remarkable if you look at the body of work. This record, the record is that what is exactly what it is, a record of that time from our perspective musically.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you stop doing that if you didn't have to?
I'm sorry, but is writing a thing you always do, or is it you do because you want to record?
No, no, I don't always write, but it always happens. You know what I mean? It's like it's time. I'll pick up a guitar and something will come out and I'll record it. But there's always a thing where we're like, it's time to make a new record. In other words, time to make some new music and then record. Those are two different things.
Right.
Clearly, both a lot of fun. And sometimes the writing really evolves in the recording studio. It's a sketch of an idea, and sometimes it can change dramatically. When we had a song called "Since When" that was a pretty big hit, and it made a lot of money because it was used on a couple of commercials. And it's that Fender Rhodes riff. But in the studio, it was a different song altogether. The arrangement was the same, and the music was the same. Once again, a blues kind of thing. But I just felt that the riff was too good for what I was singing over it. In other words, what I was singing over it was holding it back a bit. And I threw it out. And I just, one day, even before the producer, who was Garth Richardson, got there, I went with the engineer and I said, let me just sing something else over this. I just got this idea. And it's very basic, very, I'm leaving today. I think the melody I had was way too thought out, way too melodic for just a blues, let's just boogie. And it worked, So that's an example of, as you're writing it, as you're recording it, it starts to become its own thing. So you got to listen to that, too.
So the other thing that amazes me is the fact that your band, for the most part, bands are hard to keep together. And, it just seemed like in the first few years you probably changed more members than later on. But the core of your band has been together for a long time. Mm-hmm. What's the secret to that?
Well, what we say is it's you pick people that are a good hang. We don't care if you're a good player. It's someone that you can be in a van with for 3 weeks in a row. Enjoy that experience, and that really is the secret. And of course now we've all been around the block together so long that we really enjoy each other's company. To tell you the truth, when we go out on the road, we'll meet at a city or whatever airport, and we'll get to the town, and we'll all go out for a nice dinner, like old fishing buddies, catching up on stuff, and then we get to work. So that is really it. Just it didn't matter if you could play so much as you could hang.
Well, you've done well. I really appreciate you taking this time to talk to me. I've been a fan for a long time, and as I said, there's some songs that has been a big part of my life that brings back great memories. So thank you for that, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah, no worries. It was a nice conversation. Good stuff.
Great. Thank you.